small profit, or definitely could get what I put into it out of it, because it has that sort of built-in or inchoate, or built-in value inside of that house. So that's a value add. Cash flow. So you need to do just a few things. It's not a major, it's not development. You don't have to build an ADU. You don't have to go to the city and get permits. You dress it up a little bit, and then it will cash flow. That will solve that satisfies that requirement. And then number 3 is, buy where you know. And I'll give you guys, do you all know Bigger Pockets?
Oh, yes.
So, okay.
You're
So
on that.
yeah, so if you Google Bigger Pockets, Paul Morris, it'll give you an hour of great detail on what my philosophy, at least, on what to buy. And people that are phenomenal investors over time, I say, oh, I have never lost money in a real estate deal in 30 years. They go, wow, like, how's that? And I tell them this, they're like, duh. I'm like, okay, well, but it's obvious. And if you follow this, you probably won't lose money either. And they can tell me all the times they lost money. And when they lost money, it's basically when they fell out of one of those 3. And buying where I have a good friend that and we do all this analysis. I mean, I do very little analysis. I don't have to do that much now. I can do the analysis on the back of a napkin and know whether to buy or not. A friend of mine who's very smart and very wealthy and knows real estate, has a team, and he does massive analysis. And he calls me, he's like, oh, well, hey, geez, I've had it with multifamily. I lost a bunch of money. And I was like, how did you lose a bunch of money? Like, I actually want to know. It's not like, I mean it sarcastically. I'm like, tell me how you lost a bunch of money, because I want to learn. I have no idea how that would happen. And he bought phenomenal value add with lots of cash flow. And he bought it, even though he lives in Texas, he bought it far enough away from where he lived that he didn't know the area well enough. And it turns out it was, anyway, it was tagged by the city as yellow tag for some gang activity. If it turns red flag, then, he just got scared. And he's like, you know what, cut my losses, and sold and lost $500,000 in that property.
The definition of buy where you know, though, is it would be buy where you know the city, buy where you know, like, oh, I know college towns, buy where you know, it's like, oh, I live here. The definition of buy where you know, I feel like should be.
So that's a good question. Definitely where you live, for sure. So I own property only in 2 places, and that's Los Angeles and Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh is where I live and have a whole network there. Buying in college towns is a great formula. However, you don't know the college town. If you don't, it would be a deeper level of knowing than just now. There are lots and lots of people who've made, bundles of money, more than I've ever made, that they don't buy just in the city where they are. And to that I say, good for them, and I'm not opposed to it. I'll get around to it when I cannot find the deal where I know. Then I'll start looking, and I have ways and strategies to do that. But it's much more complicated than, hey, I heard this city is booming, and a realtor told me, and I'm like, no way. I'm sorry, no, give it time.
So it's pretty easy to figure out areas that It's pretty easy to figure out county low. The value add part is where I struggle. You've been doing it for 30 years, so you probably can look at something and just, out of the back of your pocket, say, I need 50 grand, or I need 100 grand, or whatever. But before you got to that point, what tips or tricks do you have
Well, I'm actually, it's a great question. Cindy, and I'm actually like, I'm not that good at it. I'm not that good at it, meaning I'm very good at picking the properties. But I'm not that, I don't really know what things cost, like you might think I would or whatever. So I would look at it and say, okay, well, I have to bring somebody and go, well, what's it gonna, like for my own house, I just didn't know. I had to have somebody go in and go, well, what's it cost to fix all this mess? And then they said like, oh, between $200,000 and $300,000. I'm like, now I know, like, let's go. Yeah, contractor, I actually took my architect through, and he's like, well, here are the amazing things you can do, which are the things I end up wanting to do. So that's why it's taking longer, raise the ceiling in one place and put new sliders, do all sorts of fancy stuff. But just to get the basics working and to get the thing looking like somebody would expect for a you go into a $5 million buy, nobody, there's not one piece of real stone in the whole house. That's a problem, except, and by the way, I have no idea what that costs to remedy. But I'm like, okay, so what needs to be done? And then even like, actually, sorry, to me, like the brand new courts kind of looked at to me.
Yeah.
And my architect's like, dude, you cannot have courts in a $5 million house. It's gotta be marble. It's gotta be, I mean, granite is even too low. You gotta have marble here. I'm like, okay, great. So what's that cost? And then there's a number. It's like, oh, well, for 50 grand, or I forget what the number is, actually. I don't really know the number. I forgot. It's like, I know the total, right? It's like, for 50 grand, we can rip out all the brand new courts, rip it all out and put in marble. I'm like, okay. And what else is wrong with it? There's not one dimmer in the whole house. So it's like you turn the lights on, you're like, you've got like a super powerful light. So you like turn the lights on, you're like in a
God.
you're like in a surgical theater, like, and my other friend who's a great realtor and who's built a lot of wealth, he's like, it's horrible, can't buy this. I'm like, why? He's like, well, I'm like, okay, well, how much does it cost to put a dimmer on every single light? And then the electrician comes out and I'm like, he's like, what do you, I have to walk around the house with you. I want to know where do you want the dimmers and where you don't. I'm like, no, you don't. I want a dimmer on every single light. He's like, well, that's crazy because there's 50 light switches and you don't want a dimmer in your closet or whatever. And I'm like, I want a dimmer on every single light, period. Done. How much does that cost? And it actually wasn't cheap because they had to do whatever they had to do, rewire some stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it was like 15 grand. And so if I'd gone around and like pick which ones I didn't want or whatever, maybe it would be 13 grand. And maybe I should have done that, but I'm like, no. Somebody told me it doesn't have dimmers, it needs dimmers. We want dimmers, period. So now there's a dimmer in every single, thing, period. And it hooks to my app, it's like, if there's a closet light on, 5 doors over or whatever, I just look at my app and oh, I'm going to bed, all off, period.
Oh, nice.
It's phenomenal.
Smart house.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Whereas, if I had gone around and picked the ones if I had left the light on somewhere, it would be on. So
Paula, just to add on to what Cindy was saying, a lot of my buyers, what they're doing is that first I'm showing them the house, they're seeing it first. The next thing they're doing is they're bringing a general contractor.
sure,
And so the general contractor gives them an idea of how much it's gonna cost.
Sure.
They do a breakdown of how much it's gonna cost, so they know exactly how much it's gonna cost, and then we would offer.
yeah,
So it really works out so nice because they work with one general contractor, so he goes everywhere with my buyer, and then he just decides what he wants to do.
yeah.
And the buyers already know what it's gonna cost, but the general contractor confirms it more.
Yeah, and so to Cindy's point where she's like, oh, I bet like I'm probably the one person like I actually don't know. I have no idea. And
The people can do it for you.
yeah, and there's a lot of annoying things, and I just don't get annoyed. It's not about the annoyance, it's about the how much, period. How much did it cost to get, like, I don't want, and then I had somebody helping do it, and he's like, oh my God, you can't believe, like, it's like they did this, and I'm like, stop.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about it. Is it above budget? Is it in budget? Is it below budget? He goes, no, it's in budget. I go, I don't want to hear about it. Just do it. Because the pipes had like, they put all the pipes were good, and somehow or another they put the connectors in with like galvanized steel, and he wants to tell me, he's like, how do you even do, like, first of all, you're only saving a couple $100 and like. Like, it's almost like they did it on, he's going on, I'm like, stop, how much? It's in budget, okay, never mind, just do whatever you have to do. If it's a written new copper out to put it, new copper plus the things, or you can just pull it. I don't wanna hear about it. So that's the value add.
I was gonna say the easy way to define that is you're looking for the Chevy in the Cadillac neighborhood. You don't want the Cadillac in the Chevy neighborhood.
Yeah,
And then take it a step farther and say you want the Chevy that hasn't been washed in the air, maybe has a flat tire, maybe a dent.
yeah,
Easy
For
stuff
sure.
to fix.
the easy stuff.
Yeah.
The easiest stuff, by the way, when I'm doing multifamily, the easiest stuff, first of all, so now we're getting down there, like what to buy. This is your time, we can
Yeah,
do this.
sure. We pick your brain.
Yeah, okay, okay. Cause I wanna run, what's that?
You're moving again?
No, I moved,
Oh,
yeah, I'm talking about, well, I lived in Santa Monica, I've been in California for 25
okay.
years or whatever, and so. Up until 6 months ago, it was always in Santa Monica, and then I moved to Mulholland.
But that one I'm-
Yeah, and so Mulholland was, I sold the house in Santa Monica and bought on Mulholland.
Oh,
Nothing worked. So it's a brand new house, like. My home inspector comes out, he's
That's
like,
the house that you rented us. when you-
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's the one you still live in.
yeah,
Oh,
and I plan on staying.
Uh-huh.
So, my home inspector's like. And here's how I got a home inspector. I called friends. I called realtor friends. I go, who's the toughest home inspector? That will, that does Mulholland. I get the name of the 2 people, whoever's ready to go, they go out, they go, oh yeah, it's just stuff. He's like, all right, here's the deal. I turn on the air conditioning doesn't work. Here, turn it here doesn't work. He goes, but here's the thing, it's brand new. So it's gotta be under warranty. But I can't figure out why it doesn't work. I'm like, well, that's the inspector, whatever. Why do you not know? How do you not know why it doesn't work? He's like, I'm not an HVAC specialist. I go around, I turn everything on. Does it work or doesn't it work? He's been doing it 20 years. He goes, I just don't know. I really don't know. I'm like, he's like, you gotta get an HVAC expert, and HVAC in particular, they gouge you. So here are some names, I have the HVAC people. So, and at some point in time, I was ready to just like rip out the new and put a different new because I couldn't figure out how to get the other things. But again, now you're talking about costs that I knew were gonna be there, and you're talking about percentages. So is it annoying to have a brand new thing that you can't figure out how to get air conditioning out of? Yeah, it's annoying. And then I might have to rip out that new one and put a different new one in to get the thing to work. And so I was without air conditioning for like 2 months. I kept saying, well, what's the deal? What they're like, well, they're trying to figure out. I'm like, okay, how much does brand new cost? Like, well, you have brand new. I'm like, no, but it doesn't work. How much does brand new cost? Like, well, really, you only need the one condenser or whatever it was that wasn't working. Like $4,000. I'm like, $4,000 for brand new.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, but you already have brand new. I'm like, rip the brand new out and put the new brand new in for $4,000. It's in the budget. And we actually did not have to do that because the one part came in from China that they needed but they were going to do it. I already gave them the go ahead. Because now you're talking about $4,000 is the numerator. Right? If you buy a house for $200,000 and now you have to put $100,000 of unexpected expense into it, that's 50%. When you have a $5 million house and you have to put the same 10, whatever it is, it's just a whole different percentage.
Well, my situation with my current buyer, I'm sorry,
That's good.
is that they just did a flip and they bought the house for $860, which was in the Valley Command area. 2-bedroom, 1 bath in 900 square feet. They made it into 1,800 square feet, 3-bedroom, 3 bath, plus additional ADU of 400 square feet, plus a garage. It was amazing. Oh, so they spent a lot of money because this was a time when it was the materials became expensive. So now when you say you're gonna buy a Chevy in a Cadillac neighborhood, okay, now he has a Cadillac in a Chevy neighborhood.
Correct,
That's hard to sell.
correct.
That's just, I mean, it's hard to, yeah, I mean, there were.
At some point, at some point in time, there's people over improve. there's no way for me to over improve
Yeah.
the house that I'm in with the view that I have. It will, you know,
It's not
You can't
overproduction.
do that.
They
Yeah.
added more square footage and the
Yeah.
house was still modern like the other ones, but they're still okay. So we're just gonna put it in the room.
here's the other thing. They're living in it.
No, they're gonna sell it.
Oh,
Split.
well, it's a problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you live in it, that's good.
I was hoping you would continue with, what you're gonna say about multi.
What was I saying? What did I start saying? Then I'll continue with it.
You were saying like when you go into buy multifamily, it's a different, you're saying the qualifications of, you're like, when I
Well,
buy.
Well, so there's, you know, the value add in multifamily is again, it can range from anything from massive change to not. But one of the things is, you know, sort of an ideal target property for me in a multifamily would be, I'm not going into the Rolls Royce neighborhood and trying to find the worst place in the Rolls Royce neighborhood. I really am, I guess, going into the Cadillac neighborhood, not the Rolls Royce or Aston Martin neighborhood. And I'm buying the Chevy and Cadillac neighborhood. And one of the things I look for is changing neighborhoods. And so, you know, there's a lot of upside just from the neighborhood improving. And there's still a lot of dogs to buy in the thing, but it's already changing. So then I'm not thinking like it's going to change someday, because that someday can take a long time.
Take generation.
Yeah, however, and there's a little bit of a science to that, because I generally will look for somewhere between 25 and 65% of the places are already changed. So if you go in below 25%, you get great deals, but you never know when it's really actually going to happen. When it's 25, 30, 35% of the neighborhood has changed, the prices have already gone up. And everybody around there is like, did you see what they sold that thing for? They're crazy, right? That's when I jump in. So I'm not jumping in at the optimal time. The optimal time would be earlier, but I don't want to jump in at the optimal time because I never know when it's going to change. And I did make that mistake one time a long time ago. And I just held and held and held and held and held. I just still didn't lose money because I sold after a long time. The thing never changed.
Yeah, I have some stuff in upstate New York it's supposed to change, but during COVID, there was a police shot a young black man, and it's not changing.
Well, I would say, and I know I went to law school in upstate New York, and I know upstate New York in those areas, and upstate New York is not that dissimilar to somewhere like Pittsburgh, which is where I'm originally from, and own a lot of real estate, and that stuff. That's where I bought. I mean, you have this massive medical center that's just and school systems that are just expanding. It's over here, and then you got downtown Pittsburgh, which is finally gentrifying and expanding. There's only this much land in between the two. Now we know that's going to go up in value, and that's where it's inevitable. That's where I bought, and it was 10 years, and it still didn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, interesting. What is going on? What is going on? And the reason is there's not enough economic pressure to push those things together. Everybody talks about how many people are leaving Los Angeles, all that kind of stuff. There's economic pressure in LA right now. With all the people that are fleeing LA, there's economic pressure right now. If you get two good neighborhoods and there's space in between, that space is going to close. How long will it take to close? Wait till 35% of it is already closing. And you look for the like organic food shop and the fancy coffee shop, and you look for some of the houses changing or whatever. You know, I did it with the co-author of my book in Austin, and I don't have a crystal ball. I did not know what was going to happen in Austin. I promise you, I had no idea. He's driving me to the airport, and there's this like sort of ramshackle neighborhood between Austin and the airport. And I just look and I see like there's like 3 fancy restaurants. There's a organic store, there's a cool coffee shop, I see like 1 or 2 or 3 houses changing, I'm like, dude, you should buy here. I'm not gonna buy here because it's Austin, I don't know Austin, I'm like, you should buy here. And we pulled up Zillow or whatever it was, we were looking, he's like, do you know that like they used to like sell crack on the street, like, right, like, I'm not kidding, like, they used to actually sell crack on the street right there, and I'm like, he's like, and now these houses are selling for 400,000 when before you couldn't get rid of them for 200, he goes, you're out of your mind, I'm like, that's what I would buy. Now, of course, they're all $1 million, right? So, you know, I bought a duplex in Highland Park 15 years ago, it's like, it was complete ramshackle, it's like, you just, there are cities and places where there's economic pressure for expansion, and upstate New York is not one of them. Pittsburgh is not one of them.
Detroit, not one.
Not one of them. I'm not saying you can't make money in upstate New York, but you don't live there. I don't live there. How about this? I still have all the infrastructure in Pittsburgh, and I'm not buying in Pittsburgh anymore. I stopped buying. There's no economic pressure. You can still buy value add. In fact, it's easier to make this thing work. This is the thing. This is the thing that people say, well, we can't figure this out in LA. I'm a realtor in LA. I know the neighborhood. And this, I can't figure this out in LA. That's why I'm gonna go to upstate New York, because this I can't figure that out. I'm like, we'll go to upstate New York. Let's figure this out here.
That's what I did. I couldn't figure it out here. So
Yeah, and I hope it works out. You know, and I'm not saying it won't work out. And if you buy right, and you can still buy value add, and you can still do whatever and all that sort of thing, I wouldn't do it. You know, who do you know in upstate New York? What did you buy in upstate New York?
duplexes and fourplexes. Good job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like going to.
So Paul, once we analyze and find an area, how do you find the investors?
okay, so that's syndication. That's what I came here to talk about.
That's the transition.
So, and it's way more boring, sorry,
No.
than the deals, but you gotta know what it is in order to do it, right? So, the first thing I would do is you have to, I'm glad we did this because you have to have this, okay? So if you took my house as an example, or I have a syndication right now. I have a syndication right now, which is in Tehachapi. Tehachapi. Maybe City Violin, where you know. Well, Tehachapi is not that far away. It's also where I got the 995 houses through the city. Okay, so it's entitled. And now they're fighting, and it's
An opportunity zone?
no, I mean, I don't think so. I don't know. It's owned by a small cap company called Greenbrier, which has a symbol GEBRF, which I bought a bunch of stock. And it's a different way of financing real estate. It's totally outside of my area of expertise. But that's what this guy does, is find these projects and do these projects, and he uses small cap publicly traded companies to fund them. And his last one was called Western Wind. And he sold that company to Brookfield Asset Management for $429 million. And he retained about 20% of that company. So he had a very good exit. Then he's on to his next thing, and it's Greenbrier Capital. Now, the last time I looked was yesterday. I bought it a lot more than 82 cents a share. Okay, but it's trading right now at 82 cents a share. And that means the market cap, which is the total value of the company, is I think $33 million for the total. And they do other Sage Ranch is the project. Sage Ranch, this is what they bought for 1 million. The publicly traded company bought it for $1 million. Okay. And now that it's entitled KB Homes or whatever, or another place, we just walk up to them and give them $60 million. Why? Because that's just called, it's 995, let's just call it 1,000, so that if I can make the math easier. So what a KB Homes pay for what they call a paper lot? A paper lot is like fully entitled, ready to go, but nothing done. And they pay like, I mean, I would say 60, 70, 80, but maybe in this market, 50,000 per paper lot. So that's $50 million in value. He will not sell it for $50 million in value because he's going to build it. And then he had a takeover offer at like $2 and something cents per share, which is quite a bit more than the U2 is trading. And he said no to that because he values the company a lot more than that. So I don't know why a publicly traded company has a market cap of $33 million when one of its assets, I don't know about the other assets, one of its assets is worth 60 million. Sounds like a great stock to buy, but I don't, and I do own quite a bit of it because of that. But I don't think that I think the stock price will reflect the value once they start like breaking ground and people really see it being built, because the reason why I think that's the case is that there's litigation about the water and the market doesn't understand that. They think, well, maybe it'll never get built. I have a different feeling about that. None of this is insider information because it's all on the press releases. So I know quite a bit about it, but that's what it is. So
That's actually a REIT though, isn't it?
no, it's a small cap publicly traded company. It's not a REIT. They do a bunch of different things. It's one of their assets.
When did they go public?
I don't know, quite a while ago. Yeah, so anyway, leaving that aside, that's why. So, leaving that aside. So guess what I did? I take what I know and start applying it in an area where I can find value add. So I bought a small office building on Tehachapi Boulevard for $400,000, and it's ramshackle. And I just got and I paid my own money, $400,000 cash, and I just got the full plans and to like completely trick it out, which I think is kind of expensive actually, but they assure me it's like A++ and you're getting what you pay for, and I'll do a little more due diligence in that. So I paid $400,000. The improvements are $300,000. That's why I think it's a little high. So now I'm at a total of $700,000 for, brand new. And then, I would put at least a $50,000 cash cushion in there, right? So I'm looking at about $750,000, of which I've paid $400,000.
Is that for offices or retail?
It's an office. Yeah, it's an office space. Honestly, I can't even tell you how many square feet it is. I can't remember. Like 1,500 square feet. I don't know. I'll look it up. So I know I can rent this for, very conservative. You get more than $6,000, would say. I know I can rent this for $7,000 a month. Okay. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for scarcity and I'm looking for growth. So that now I'm going to have more and more chasing around a small amount of property. So Tehachapi Boulevard is only like 4 blocks long. And then it turns out, because I tried to buy this property on the other side of the street, that the railroad owns the property on the other side of the street. If you buy that railroad property, you're on a land lease, which I don't believe in. We'll even go into that. So now there's only one side of the street that's available to buy stuff. And I see this area totally changing. I bought it before the next thing happened. And the next thing that happened was, you know, my realtor in Tehachapi sent me this thing like, oh my God, they're building the largest dry dock in the United States, you know, 25 minutes away. And here's the article. Can you believe it? And I'm like, number one, I'm like, what's a dry dock? I then read the article, I skimmed the article, and if I'd read the article, I would have done a little better. But I skimmed the article, I'm like, okay, now I know what a dry dock is, but why is this the greatest thing that ever happened? And then I called the realtor. I didn't want to appear as dumb as I seemed, and I was like, oh, actually, I didn't call the realtor, I called the guy from Greenbrier. I was like, why is a dry dock good for us? And he's like, are you kidding me? You know, so whatever. They're, you know, I don't have to get into like what a dry dock is, but they're going, it's actually phenomenal for it's phenomenal for LA, and it's phenomenal for the environment, because what happens is they drop an astronomical number of cargo at the port of LA, astronomical, and some of that cargo goes to like grocery stores in LA, which means they would have to take it on a truck and drive it into LA. Okay, that's fine. 95% of it, I made that number up, but a massive amount of it is not for LA. So what do they have to do? They have to put it on trucks and drive it through LA and then go wherever they're going to go. And that's causes danger on the highway, congestion, super expensive, you know, diesel fuel, the whole 9 yards. So with a dry dock, what they're going to do is they're going to take all of those containers. They're going to take all of those containers, stick them on a train, and they're going to send the train up to Tehachapi, and that's what they call it, a dry dock. Because there's no, I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about, dry dock. We're in the desert, like you're in the Mojave Desert. Like, what does that mean? And right, it's like, oh, what they do is they take the port of LA and they just take all the stuff. And by the way, Tehachapi is at elevation, and then everything is downhill. So the trains go up the hill a lot easier than one truck at a time. So everything's going to go up there, maybe except for the few containers that are going to go to the LA grocery stores. Congestion will die down. There'll be less like traffic accidents. I mean, it's good for everybody. And there's 3,300 union jobs that are going to be very close to this, which means way more than 3,300 people, because there's generally with family and so forth. So I just see this as a boom area that where I don't see upstate New York or Pittsburgh or Detroit, or my fiance has a house in Kalamazoo, and those just aren't boom areas. You know, 10 years from now, it's going to be, you know, when I look at she has the house, there's no loan on it in Kalamazoo. I look at what did she pay for it 10 years ago? It's like not much less than what it's worth right now. Now, I'll just go through a rent calculation. I can tell you why that would be attractive for renters. I can tell you why people in places like LA look at cap rates out there and go, oh, I'm going to invest my money out there because the cap rates are so much higher. The cap rates here were almost zero at one point in time. So you're like, what? That's crazy. But you get 10 years of no appreciation. And here you get 10 years of appreciation. That's what I believe. That's what I've seen in 30 years. So if all the properties were where Pittsburgh has a great cap rate, if I had all those properties in LA, you know, I wouldn't be here teaching and being I would be still there, but I'd be like, oh yeah, I just got back from wherever on my jet. Here teaching. Yeah. So I've got my island on Mulholland, which I love.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you. So, so here's the syndication. To talk about something in theory is a lot harder than you just actually take a regular deal. So basically, this deal is going to cost $750,000. Okay, so I wrote a check for 400,000. Let's say you don't have a check for 400,000, right? Because the first syndication that I did, I didn't have any money. And then I did syndications until I had money. That was maybe 10 years later. And I'm like, as soon as I have money, I'm not doing any more syndications because I don't want to deal with investors. I don't want to deal with, I want to do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it. I don't want the accountability and the hassle and the whatever. We can get into that another time. And then I stopped doing syndications. I invested my own money. But there were always more deals than I had money for. And looking back, if I had continued to do syndication the whole time, I would have created a massive more wealth than I currently have investing my own money. So that's why I'm back to doing syndications, because obviously I can afford to do this deal on my own. So it's such a great deal. Why am I going to syndicate it? And that's why I didn't syndicate it. I'm like, oh, this is such a great deal. Why am I going to syndicate it? Well, it's because I don't have money for the next deal and the next deal and the next deal, because you could buy 5 of these in Tehachapi. And in fact, next to 131 acres for Sage Ranch, one of the things that I did was when I got that project across the finish line, I'm like, I know you own other property over here and there. I want to be a partner in one of these properties. And I bought the 28 acres next door to Sage Ranch. And I paid $600,000 for that. That's a crazy deal because it's next door to this property that's going to be worth several $100 million. So I don't have the money to develop the 28 acres and buy 5, retail places. And I see the motel, which is completely ramshackle, but looks really cool. And you could redevelop that motel. And it is Tehachapi is a tourist attraction, plus all of these new jobs. This is an area that's over the 35% mark in terms of happening. 10 years ago, it would take 10 years to get to where we are now. Now, the next 10 years are not going to look like the last 10 years. The Sage Ranch is going to go through, the dry dock is going to be done. It's going to be a whole different place. So now is the time for that. And I don't have the money to take advantage of all of these things. So in a $750,000, what I'm going to do, and I will say this, a syndication can work however you want it to work. It's a contract. You can say, I'm the syndicator, I get X, Y, and Z. Or I'm the syndicator and I get A and B. It doesn't matter. It's however you write it. But one of the things that was interesting is I did syndication before I came to LA. I did syndication on all these properties, and it was all friends and family. And I did it a certain way with certain split of money. And people were like, that's crazy. How did you get investors to do that? I'm like, well, it's friends and family. And we're like, well, like you're ripping them off. I'm like, really? And then I took the spreadsheet out, because what I did was I did a 50-50 split. They put all the money in and they got a preferred return, which I'll explain. And then I took 50% of the upside, and they got paid. They got paid everything first. And then when they were all paid, and they got their money back, they got their preferred return back, they got everything before I got $1. And then when they got everything back, we split everything 50-50. And they're like, well, we got investors like, will not tolerate 50-50. I'm like, okay, well, what will they tolerate? Oh, well, 70-30. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, well, maybe we have to do 70-30 in LA. I'm like, tell me the rest of the deal. They're like, well, we have an acquisition fee, we have a management fee, we have a disposition fee, we have a refinance fee, we have a, right? I'm like, okay. And then I spreadsheeted out, and the 50-50, the 50-50 was better. But it was interesting because it really depended on the deal, but it was weird. It was almost identically the same.
Oh, after fees.
After fees and everything, the 50-50 was the same as the 70-30.
And the fees just complicated.
It depends on And you know, there's a reason for fees, and I understand it. It's because, hey, you know what, we're not, you know, somebody that's selling you the fees are like, hey, you know what? We're not running to the bank with the fees. We've got, you know, we've got staff that we have to pay. We've got to keep the lights on. We have to have, can't do it without fees. They're like, okay, great. Well, you've got fees, so it's 70-30. I didn't have fees, so it was 50-50. And when you did a spreadsheet, it all evened out. Now, if it's a terrible deal, let's just look at the far extremes. If it's a terrible deal, the syndicator does better with the fees and less of the upside. If it's a phenomenal deal, the syndicator does better with no fees and more of the upside. But they run out roughly the same.
So were these for buy and hold or were these for flips? Like this, when you paid out the 50-50, was it, like, did you buy and hold with the monthly,
They were buying holds and most of them frankly did not cash flow really at all until we had a capital event. And then we had a capital event, we made, you know, because value add generally doesn't cash flow that well. But
That's a capital event that we buyers.
refire sell, yeah, and then they just made gobs of money. Because one of the things we did, it's friends and family, right? So it's like, oh, my brother, you know, my business partner and I had no money. It took $1.2 million to get into this one deal 20 years ago. That's a lot of money. His brother put in 600,000. My brother put in 600,000. We gave them a 6% preferred return. And there was a lot of deferred maintenance. So we had a lot of cash flow. But when the cash flow came in, we were fixing everything. As you're fixing everything, the value's going up. We're also paying down the mortgage because it's over time, and plus rents and everything go up over time. So it's like, it's just going up, you know, and even our investors, we're not getting any money. When we finally get over the break-even point, now we've got really nice units in nice areas. And now we're past the break-even point, but now we owe them like 5 years worth of preferred return. So now, you know, the next several years, they're just getting all the money to pay back their preferred return. Now, what we did in the middle of that was we refied. And when we refied, we were able to pay them back all of their money, plus all of the preferred return due, plus a little bit of profit. So like they got they got $800,000 each, and you know, my partner and I got, you know, 50,000 each because there was, you know, but then capital accounts were all clear. And then guess what? There's still no, at the refi, when you take all that equity out, there's still no cash flow now, right? But they don't have a capital account, so they don't get 6%.
so they're out of it, so they're out.
They're in the deal still. They've gotten all their money back and they're still in the deal.
That's what my question is.
And then you go on, then we went on and on and on. And then when we sold and we got millions of dollars of profit, their rate of return is literally infinity.
Yeah, so we got the 50%.
They got that.
plus.
They got all the upside, yeah. So, Val's giving me like.
But you don't get there, you don't get in there without their money to start. It's
That's
like
right.
if they were all the money.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I'm gonna write this out like not like the 50-50 family deal, because your investors will run and scream. It's essentially the same, but I'll do it the way. Again, you can do it any way you want, but I'm going to do what a standard deal is that investors expect and understand. Okay, so as the market, so it's basically there's a few rules. So it's basically 70-30
They're 70, we're 30
of the upside,
of the upside.
right? So 70-30 of, you know, profit and, you know, capital event, which is refi or sale. This is at the end of the day, sort of in reverse order. Okay. So what really comes first is what really comes first is fees. Because you get the syndicator in a 70-30 deal gets the fees first. So you can have a acquisition fee, which is basically 1 to 2%. That's on top of realtor commission or
I was
whatever.
gonna ask, that's on top of the commission.
Yeah.
we already earned.
Yeah.
putting the deal together.
Yeah. So I didn't get any commission. But the acquisition fee would be 1 to 2%. Now let's look at this, right? The acquisition fee is either going to be 1 to 2% of the 400 or 1 to 2% of the 750, depending on how you write the contract. So let's just say it's, 2% of this or whatever it is. So it's like $8,000, right? So when we close the deal, we'll just close the deal. I get $8,000. I got money first. Okay. Then there's an asset management fee, which again is 1 to 2%.
Now, is that on a per month basis or is that a
When
one-time upfront?
it's annual. So this is good, great question, Philip, because this is, sorry, that's a great thing. This is one time. Acquisition fee is one time. Asset management fee is annual. Or you can take it monthly, but it's calculated annually, right? And the asset management fee really is the total amount of money. So it's the 400 plus the 300 plus the $50,000, it's a cash cushion. So it's $750,000. So basically, even if we take it at 2%, it's still $15,000 a year. Now, any syndicator is going to say like, dude, I've got to drive to Tehachapi. I've got to have an accountant to whatever. I'm not running to the bank with my 2% fee. Now, if this were a multi-million-dollar thing, it's just like selling a bigger house. There's more pressure. You can say, well, they don't want to pay 2% on $100 million, only going to pay 1%. Okay, fine. 1% on $100 million, it's $1 million. These syndicators are still not running to the bank on the $1 million because when you have $100 million under management, you have to have a staff.
Yeah.
That staff is going to cost $300,000-$400,000, but then they will have some bill left over. Okay, so it's asset management fee, and then there's often a refi or disposition fee. And that's one time. So if I get a refi, if I refi the thing, I take a point or whatever to like have the aggravations of to run around to the banks or whatever.
Get closed.
Or if I sell it, maybe I get like a 2% disposition fee, so the total sale price, and this is the total refi amount, so it's a 2%. Say 2%. Again, you can make it anything you want. When I was doing it, let's take this down. Because these fees get paid first. Okay. Then you have what's known as a preferred return. And these are generally cumulative, not compounding. Okay.
So it's not like bad debt or a good mutual fund.
Yeah, so you can set your preferred return of whatever amount you want. It could be 2%, it could be 10%. Generally, I'm seeing, 5-6%. Sometimes people are doing 7%. Sometimes people are doing 4%, depends on the deal.
What
So
is
it's
the
just-
cumulative?
So I'll explain that. So preferred return, let's just call it 5%, okay? Now, this is the building at Tehachapi. This is why it's much better to do it with an actual syndication so that we can really look at the numbers. And what happens is I'm collecting from investors, say I have no money. Now, the market here typically demands that the syndicator put 10% of their own money in. Okay, so if the total raise is $750,000, I'm putting in,
75.
yeah. Now. So here's the raise. I'm putting in 75,000. And 675,000. Oops. Oh, a little dyslexic. 675,000 is what I'm raising from other people. Now, my 75,000 gets treated just like their 675. I'm an investor alongside of them. Whatever, this is the 750 that gets, so I'm gonna get preferred return on my 75,000, just like an investor.
But you pay yourself last as long as everyone else is taking care of it.
This money gets treated exactly the same.
I see.
It's like, forget that I'm even the syndicator. It's like my money, Terry Lynn is an investor, Philip's an investor. It's like, I'm treated exactly the same, which is good. Smart people who invest are going to want to know that the syndicator is doing the thing. So, I have another friend that he's got a lot of money and he never does a deal without syndicating it. And he's been doing it for at least like 10 or 15 more years than me. And he's worth about $750 million. He can certainly afford to do these deals on his own, never does them on his own. Now, sometimes he will do more than 10% of the deal. So it's like, oh, hey, we need $100 million for this deal. This is a phenomenal deal. I'm going to go ahead and put 30 million in or 20 million in. I'm going to do 20 or 30%. Now, this guy's in 30%. You're like, okay, I know this.
Must be good.
It must be good. But they don't want to see you with zero skin in the game. Now, I have another friend that's got all these great deals, young guy, and he's like 1% in. I'm like, how do you do that? He's like, well, I've got great deals. I have a great track record. I'm like, well, why don't you put more money in? He's like, well, I don't have more money. I'm doing these massive deals. I just don't have the money to put in. So again, these are all rules of thumb. Generally, smart investors, it's the rule of thumb that the syndicator puts in at least 10%. So.
What about the person raising capital?
Well, the syndicator is generally raising capital. If I have somebody, so let's just say for this deal, okay? Cindy says, you know what? You're busy. You don't want to hassle the investors. I've got a cadre of investors that want to invest. You just don't worry about it. I'm gonna take care of the whole thing. I'm gonna get your investors in. You might have to do the pitch to them, but I'm gonna introduce you to investors. The Cindy gets something for that. Remember, it's all how we design it. If Cindy actually said that to me, even though I have investors, I'd be like, let's do it. Because I want less hassle. So where does Cindy's money come from? Well, the answer is it would have to come out of the syndicator's side. I'm not going to charge the investors money to raise, but I could. But a sophisticated investor is going to say, not going for it. So I'm willing to do it. So Cindy comes and says, you know what? You've got these deals. I know people with money that's work something out. They're like, okay, well, you can have a piece of the syndicator's pie. Here's how we'll do that. So that's the answer to your question. And by the way, I have introduced people to huge syndicators, and actually one was really, really huge, and they got close to doing the deal, but they didn't do the deal. And I was going to get a percentage of that, of the money that was raised, but it's not coming out of the investor side, it's coming out of the syndicator side. It did not happen, but it would have been nice. So in this particular deal. Okay. I take the $750,000. We buy the building for 400. Let's use this actual deal. I already put this 400,000 in. That's simple, because we're gonna leave 75,000 in. So I'm going to be 10% of the, they call this the equity side. I would get a check for $325,000. I left 75,000 in. We raised another $675,000. That $675,000 is going to pay for the property. It's going to pay for the build out. And it's going to pay for the cushion. And I actually, even on the 70-30, I don't charge all these fees. Like, I don't really believe in it. Whatever, and like, oh, I'm gonna like make a living on the $8,000 or whatever, I'm gonna get out of that deal. It's just, I'm still doing it with friends and family, but I do 70-30. Now let's talk about the 6% preferred return. It is cumulative, non-compound. So let's say one of our investors, we're going to use a really round number. Let's forget about how much I'm going to get, because 10% is, it's 200. Let's say we have 6 investors in here, and 5 of them do 100,000, and one of them does 175,000, just to make the numbers real easy. Okay, so our one investor's name is Val. Okay, and Val put $100,000 in. From day one, she has a capital account with the company, and that capital account says 100K. That's what's in her capital account. 1 year from now, her capital account will go to 106,000. That's 6%. Let's say we don't pay any money out yet, because we're transitioning the building or we're fixing things, or Year 2, no money paid out. Val's capital account now says, whoops, $112,000. Okay, so when rent starts coming in, the first thing we do is we pay the capital accounts down, and we pay them in proportion to their investment. And so when 50,000 profit comes in, the 70-30 split is at the end after everything's paid off. But everything's not paid off. So we have $50,000 and we have 750,000 plus 6% plus 6% in the capital account. So that $50,000 goes in to adjust that down, including my 10%. I get a little piece of that on my 75 grand, just like Val gets a piece of it for her 100 grand. That all gets treated the same. And then, but this property will cash flow, and it'll cash flow right out of the gates. But all of that cash is going to the investors, and it's going to pay their preferred return first. And then when their preferred return, let's say year 2, we're making more than 6% on it. So now they get all of their preferred return, plus we're paying down their principal. They're getting some of their principal back also. And the value of the property is going up.
Now, if you pay off their principal, you still owe them 6% every year.
If their principal is paid off, you don't owe them, because that preferred return is only on the outstanding principal.
Got it.
So if you take it from the investor side, so Val's got her $100,000. She's like, let's say November 1st. November 1st, she writes a check for $100,000. And what she gets is a certain percentage ownership in the LLC that does the syndication. And then she starts getting money back. And the money that she gets back will show her, this is your capital account. Your capital account on day 1 has 100 grand, but After a month, it's gonna have a bit more than 100 grand, right? It's gonna be 100 grand, $500, right? Because that's the 6%. Times 1 month. See, my vision brain is on, it's good. So. If I pay her $600. Well, the 500 was the preferred return. Now she just got $100 of her capital back. Now her capital account goes down to, right? So from an investor perspective, you're getting all of your money back. Plus you're getting 6% on the money that's outstanding. So halfway through the deal, you've gotten all your interest plus 50,000 of your original 100,000 back. You're only going to get preferred return on the 50,000 that's still outstanding until it gets all paid off. And when it's all paid off, there's no more preferred return. And then everything gets split 70-30. 70% to investors. Now their rate of return is infinity because they've got all their money plus interest back. And 70% goes to the investors and 30% goes to the syndicator. And then if down the line, 4 or 5 years from now, we sell the building for $150,000. First of all, the capital accounts have been paid down a bit, or $1.5 million. The capital accounts have been paid down a bit. Plus, there's this windfall of money. Then the investors get, let's say there's $1 million in profit. Then the investors get $700,000 worth of profit, which they split pro rata. I'm 10% of the investor. So I'm gonna get, there's $1 million profit, I'm getting 100,000, just like I'm an investor because I am. And then the other, piece is going to go to the investors, and then the syndicator gets 30% of the deal.
And that 70% split between all these funds.
Yeah, that's correct. Pro rata.
And they can't force your hand to sell at any point because you're the syndicator, you decide when to sell, when to buy.
Great question. Depends on the contract. In my contracts, they can't force, I don't know anybody that has a contract that says they can force you to sell because, on the other hand, people do like a sunset, meaning we expect to hold this property for 5 years. And I have some properties that I tell investors on the way in, this is a buy and hold, and other things like I expect something to, we're gonna revamp the building like this one is. We're gonna get the rents up, and then we're gonna sell. And I expect that'll happen. And if I expected it would happen in 3 or 4 years, I would probably say it's gonna happen in 5 years. Because you always wanna underestimate what you really think you're gonna do so that you exceed their expectations. And in these things, I've had 30, 20-30% internal rate of return until they get all their money back. And then they still have a piece of the thing. I mean, the first one that I bought we bought with our brothers, they've been paid back. They were paid back 15 years ago. We still own a piece of that property. So it's like, they've gotten millions of dollars of return. First, they got their money back and their 6% back. And once they got all their money plus 6%, then we were all partners.
I think you gotta go, but what entity do you buy in? It's like buy through an LLC.
But generally by through an LLC. Yeah.
Can you buy them out? Buy out their parts?
So
That's what I was gonna ask.
So in the same way, again, you write it any way you want, but in a typical deal or in my deal, there's no forced sale after a period of time. That's on the I'm controlling the deal side of it. And then the flip side of it is I cannot force them to sell. So I don't force them to sell. You can have it in there to force them to sell. I've even seen a syndication deal where they go, well, we're going to put a cap on you at like 30% rate of return. And after that, it all comes back to the syndicator. And I'm like, I thought it was actually a very good deal. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like what? It just didn't seem right to me. I'm taking all the risk or most of the risk alongside the syndicator. I want an opportunity for all of the upside, not just the 30% max. Yeah.
But yeah, can you buy it like one of the partners wants out, so they buy out.
So, yeah, so, and so what has happened is there's, and let's be clear, one of the downsides of a syndication is there's no clear exit. Okay, however, I've been doing it for 30 years. I've never had a scenario. I have had scenarios where people want out. And when they want out because they want out, they're like, oh, well, the thing has gone way up in value and I'm gonna put my kid through college, I want out. And I've never had a scenario where either I didn't buy it or one of the other partners bought it like that.
Okay.
So like, yeah, we
So
want to.
that's not an issue.
It has not been an issue in 30 years. That doesn't mean it couldn't be an issue. Yeah. All right. Well,
Thank you.
again, thanks a lot. No, everything you know about litigation.
You gotta read books too, with the podcast and the book go hand in hand, and then flow coaching, not to pitch flow, but you read the book. Read the, or listen to the 2 or 3 podcasts that he's on, they're almost identical in effects. And then you match it with flow, it all blends together.
Yeah, you can push flow all you want. I don't feel bad because guess what? I charge my usual fee for flow coaching. That's $0.
$0.99, $3.99,
Yeah.
awesome.
All right. Thank you very much.
Paul, thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you very much.
I'll take it.
All right.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, Cindy, so raise all the money you want.
For sure. Seriously though, Paul, you're, you're money, but, I think I'll make you beat it.
There you